Welcome to the Global Resilience Exchange channel. My name is Danielle McCoy, and this is a channel for organizational resilience and leadership. Today, I woke up early to be a guest of the BCM Club at Rabdan Academy in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. The session was entitled The Importance of DEI in BCM. And I'm recording this video to recap the conversation I had with the student moderator and to share my additional reflections and perspectives. So, question one: why is DEI necessary for strong BCM programs? So I think DEI is necessary in BCM because continuity plans only work if they reflect the reality of the people and communities that we are trying to serve. It shouldn't be idealistic, it shouldn't be pie in the sky. We really want to know what the average employee or customer experience is. And I think when we ignore equity and inclusion, we build plans that look good on paper but quietly exclude people, whether that's based on their role, their language, disability, or culture. And that's a resilience risk. And it's just not good enough to have something to hand over to the regulators. It has to be more than that. So I think inclusive BCM gives a better risk identification, more realistic impact analysis, and higher engagement in exercises and real events, which will directly improve responses and recovery outcomes. I won the DEI Champion Award for the BCI last year for the work that I'm doing, bringing practitioners together to kind of work through some of these things. And I think that strong continuity is people centered continuity, and people are inherently diverse. The second question was what inclusive by design means for BCM. And I think inclusive by design means you don't just bolt it on to a finished program or a finished plan or product. You build it within the first question, right? So that looks like designing BIAs and risk workshops and exercise. So frontline staff, middle management, all of the above, different locations, different groups have a voice in shaping assumptions and priorities. I think assumptions really can make or break your plan. Operationally, it means we plan for different abilities, languages, intellect, and access to technology as a default, but not special accommodation that we're going to have to fix later. So when inclusion is designed in your program, you get plans that people recognize themselves in. And that drives real adoption during a crisis. We don't want people fighting the plan or fighting the program in times of crisis. Question three: disruption demands confidence. How does DI build confidence? And I strongly believe that preparing ourselves and understanding risk and the risk landscape by understanding each part of our business strengthens how we can execute resilience, how we can become more confident. So, if we're thinking about what we're putting into our plans, can it actually be done? Are people having the skills and trust leadership to follow that plan under stress? I think a diverse and inclusive team also spots blind spots earlier because they're confident to have those conversations and challenge groupthink. And leaders then can really pivot and make better decisions during a crisis because they're getting strong information. That combination of trust and perspective is what gives organizations confidence to act decisively instead of freezing or defaulting to the loudest voice in the room, which I have seen before. Question four: how does cultural differences change continuity planning? And this question was specific to my experience in the US versus the UAE. So I think working in the US, and you both with students and both even with some private sector enterprises. I really believe that continuity is not just technical, it's also cultural. So, for example, how you speak up, how you handle hierarchy, decision making speed differs. And that directly affects crisis communication and escalation paths. So, in some cultures, people may hesitate to question a leader or to report bad news quickly, so designing escalation protocols and training to say, hey, we really do need to know this information sooner rather than later. You won't be penalized. That could be really important. And Western norms are not norms across all of the US, right? So you do have indigenous groups in different parts of the US that, you don't challenge authority. And so, whether that's because of religion or ethnicity, et cetera, all of that can change how your BCM strategy will land in different contexts. So, understanding the people is very important. Question 5 was to tell a story of when one size fits all failed. And I thought about a recent conversation that I had with someone who's in a mid-sized organization. And the software out of the box is too expensive, it's not applicable, you don't have the large team to answer all the questions and input the information. And so just assuming that you can use a product that everyone else does is could get you into trouble, and I'll leave it at that. The next question was, how can folks adopt Western templates and standards in non-Western organizations? And I think the important thing to remember is that it's a template. It's just a starting point, not a finished product. The most important step is localization through co-creation with the people who are on the ground. That's the workers, that's the community stakeholders, that's the leadership that's there and understands the landscape. And sometimes that means simplifying language and adjusting impact criteria to what really matters locally, and mapping it to local regulations and cultural norms. So you can pilot a framework to see if it really does meet the needs. Start at one site, start in one department, start on one floor and see how that goes before, taking on everything that may not apply. But once again, understanding the assumptions that you're bringing into that, trying to use that template completely in your organization. Question 7, making BIA and crisis recovery inclusive of all employees. How does it work? And so when I am doing my BAAs, I am really looking for folks who are at different levels of the organization. That's not to say that it always works, that I have access to them, but it's really nice to hear the different perspectives from folks, not just managers, the ones who are at different pay grades and maybe different shifts and maybe different languages and abilities, to really hear what's going on, and understanding who's receiving the information, why something could or could not work, and really talking through a process with a group. So when I have the opportunity to meet with a group versus an individual, I will definitely take advantage of that in my BIA meetings. Then in crisis and recovery planning, I think it helps to be able to translate that information a little bit better to an actual practical mitigation strategy. And the last question was, if I could change anything when it comes to DEI or being more inclusive in business continuity, I would say that I would change the perspective of what a subject matter expert is. I don't want people who have just a fancy title or just a degree. I think subject matter experts comes in all shapes, sizes, and abilities and years of experience. If someone is doing the work and they're doing it well, I want to hear from them to make sure that I'm getting all the information that I have to make the appropriate strategy. So that was the conversation today. Thank you.